I'm Andy Smith, Chair of the Coney County Conservation Bank Board, calling this April 6th, 2021 meeting to order. First item in attendance today, we have Nick Gambrell, we have Emily Hitchcock, myself, Charles Vanover, and Mr. Scuddy Walker. Ryan Keese and Laura Havren are absent, so we have a quorum. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the March 2nd, 2021 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Well, we'll say motion by Emily Hitchcock. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, for Charles. Any discussion about the minutes? All in favor of approval? Aye, and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? And so passed unanimously. Next on the agenda is the treasurer's report. Laura Havren, the treasurer, is out today, and I've asked Charles Vanover to give the treasurer's report. Charles?
Community First Bank, as of February 28th, 2021, opening balance $4,420. Zero deposits, zero expenditures, closing balance $4,420. Treasury report for the local government investment pool as of February 28th, 2021. Opening balance $344,292.41. Deposits are reinvestment of interest at $36.54. There have been no expenditures. Balance at the end of the period, $344,328.95.
Okay, thank you very much, Charles. Do I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye, and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None, passed unanimously. Next on the agenda is fundraising and public relations reports. I'll start those off. I've contacted Senator Thomas Alexander's office several times, but haven't made any contact to have a meeting with Senator Alexander. Been a hair frustrating in that regard, but I understand he's got other things on his agenda. I did speak with Phil Shirley, who is the Director of Parks and Rec for Coney County, just to see if there are ways that we could coordinate on things, and our conversation was wide-ranging and included that he speaks to Senator Alexander on a regular basis, and I asked him if he would just mention us to the senator, and he said he would, and he also said that he would be interested in looking for opportunities for the Conservation Bank to coordinate with Parks and Rec on potential projects or funding. And I thought that was encouraging, thought that was good. And we'll look to do that in the future. He also said that Senator Alexander would be most interested in, what would catch his attention and maybe draw his interest, would be any kind of request or communication or discussion involving a specific project or a specific property, rather than what I was thinking, which was, could we get an endowment from the legislature to help us generate revenue to do what we do? And so that's something to take into account and into mind as we go forward in those discussions. And hopefully I will get, or the bank will get, a sit down with Senator Alexander so we can just flesh out what we do and what possibilities might be and what might be most attractive to him. I also had a discussion with Amanda Brock about grant writing, telling her that one of the things that we propose to do is write grant proposals to private foundations or other entities, and just querying how that might be coordinated with the county or in conflict with the county. And the county has a grant writer, and she told me that the grant writer would not be available for us, that the grant writer writes grant proposals for specific county entities or projects like Parks and Rec, that sort of thing, not for commissions and boards like ours. And she asked that if I do write grant proposals, or if we do write grant proposals, that we let them review it and coordinate that with her, but there was no hint or that, we should not write our own grant proposals and go down that path. And in that regard, I have started working on a proposal with the Duke Energy Foundation. And, they have different grant programs, and it looks like as far as I can tell, the max that I could ask for is $10,000, which is not kind of what we're thinking, but every dollar helps, and I'm going to continue down that path as well. I've also talked to Paul Kane, who's on the Coney County Council, and we're going to meet to discuss potential corporate donors and contacts. Ryan Keese, one of our members, actually suggested that I do that Paul would be a very good contact to talk, or person to talk to about those contacts. And, we were throwing around names, Ryan and I, Board Warner, Trail, Greenfield Industries. And if anybody has any other ideas for potential corporate donors, that would be greatly appreciated. And our intent will be to have a sit down with any potential donor like that and solicit a significant donation from them. That's all I have to report from fundraising. Does anybody have any questions or any thoughts? Okay. All right, so, yes, ma'am.
I do, before you leave the topic.
Go ahead.
Okay. The first one is, has any consideration been given to starting an official campaign, setting a goal, and starting a campaign with attendant publicity? Or is that something that we should consider? And then my second thing is really more in the move of a motion. I would like to make a motion to have the IT department put a link for donations so that people can make online donations. So the motion would be to have the IT department put a link so that a link for donations on our webpage. So
Okay.
that is my motion. The other one was more of a throw it out to that committee or whatever.
I'll second that motion. Discussion about that. Any thoughts? Sound like a good idea?
Like a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all in favor of that motion, raise hands and aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So that's a logistical question. Do you have anybody who wants to be the lead on making the contact with the IT department?
I think
Do we want to do
Katie
it?
has to do it. I don't think that we
Okay,
can.
all right, so we'll work with Katie on doing that. Any other fundraising ideas or thoughts? Okay, PR report. Laura and I met with Mr. Walker, had one meeting with him, and then had another meeting with Mr. Gambrell, just as an orientation. And Charles, I'm sorry that we hadn't done that with you, and we will do that with you. But one of the things that came out of that and talking to Nick was that in Nick's work, he does a lot of presentations to a lot of entities, Rotaries and clubs like that. And we asked him to give us that list and the contacts so that we could potentially begin to do those kind of presentations as well. We had talked in the past about having an article in the journal, and this ties in a little bit with what you were saying, Emily. We haven't developed that concept of like an endowment campaign or something like that. We have talked about getting our name out there, and that's kind of where we've been headed, or getting something in the paper. So Ryan has talked to the associate editor of the Journal, Howell Welch, who's talked to at least one of the reporters, and where we're headed with that is for Ryan to coordinate a meeting between a couple of bank board members and Journal staff to discuss an article. And, you know, we don't know where that would go or what type of article it would be. Laura has completed a first draft of a press release that I think could be used as the basis for that article. So I predict that that's going to happen before our next meeting in May. And, you know, I think it'll be more of the general idea of who we are, what we do, pictures of some of our projects, you know, maybe quotes from Max Stone, Chris Starker, Eddie Martin, and maybe some of the landowners that we've given grants for projects on their property as well. And with, you know, discussion of the need for additional funds, that sort of thing. But still not part of a strategic type campaign. I also wanted to mention that the changes that we had asked for the bank's website, or our web page on the county website, has been made, and we appreciate that. I think it looks really good, and under that as well are the documents, our policies, our grant agreement, our evaluation documents, that sort of thing. I think it really looks good, and that's exactly what we wanted. Thank you, Katie, for
It does.
making that happen. That's wonderful. Any other thoughts about PR before we leave that topic? And one thing just to keep in mind is, you know, for our open government laws, we can't ever meet informally as a quorum, which is 4, but we can meet in committees or whatever as 3. And that's kind of how we've structured our committees. The Fundraising Committee is Laura, Ryan, and myself. We have a Procedures Committee, which was Laura, Emily, and myself. But we're more than happy to interchange that as we need to, you know, just on an ad hoc basis as we go along. If you feel like that's one of your strengths or a place that you would like to work for us. As Charles reported today, we've got about $348,000 left of the little bit of money that we've raised on our own, other than the $618,000 that Duke gave us in 2016. We've given, I think, 7 grants so far, and then that money goes quick. And now's the time to start working on beefing our account back up. And that's, unless we get some major endowment, that's going to be a lifelong process that we have to do as the Oconee County Conservation Bank. So discussion items, number 5 on the agenda. So we put off approving the grant agreement last time because we had decided that it needed language related to the requirement that. Yes, ma'am.
Can I stop you real quick? I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not trying to be rude. I'm trying to call Chris Starker.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to call him because he just sent me a message. So I didn't want to be rude, but
No.
I was just trying to call him
Okay.
to tell him that he can get on the.
Okay. You want me to
Zoom.
wait till you finish that?
No.
You're just telling me what you're doing.
Yes, I didn't want to be rude.
No, you're not. I
So
would
I'm
never
just
think you would
letting
be.
know. I'm actually gonna go out in the hallway because
Okay.
my cell phone is not picking up. So I'm gonna run out there real quick and give him a call and tell him. So anyway, just want to let you know what I was doing. I'll be right back.
We've got 3 items before we get to his, so
Okay.
Got a
Well,
little bit of
hopefully I
time.
can get a hold of him, but I will be right back.
Okay.
Let me see if I can.
thanks for the heads up, Katie.
You're welcome.
So the thing we wanted to put in the grant agreement that wasn't in there before when we brought it last month was if there's a mortgage on a piece of property that comes to us for a conservation easement, the law is that that mortgage is going to be subordinate to the conservation easement. In other words, the conservation easement will actually, what it provides for and requires will take precedent over the mortgage. That if anything happened to that mortgage, it was a foreclosure, transfer, whatever, the provisions of the conservation easement will stay in force. You know, the conservation easements aren't going to, I don't believe, directly affect anything between the lender and the property owner. It's just that the nature of a conservation easement is that it's permanent. It's going to last forever. And a mortgage or whatever happens to a mortgage won't detract from, diminish, kill, cancel out what that conservation easement requires. And that's part of the reason, part of how they exist under the Internal Revenue Code, is that they're perpetual and nothing's gonna pull them out of that. So a foreclosure won't kill a conservation easement or anything like that. So, with that said, you have in the backup materials a copy of the grant agreement, and what I'm gonna hand out right now is the language that Emily and I came up with, just to put that in the grant agreement. And you'll see that it's letter C on this page. And I'm gonna, no, I'll wait and give one to Katie. So we can't make a lender agree that it's gonna be subordinate. It's just, that's the law. It will be subordinate. And what we wanted to do was make that clear in the grant agreement, that the landowner understands, C, that the placement of the conservation easement on the property is a conveyance of a property interest to which any mortgage is subordinate. That's the only change we made. We just wanted to put it in writing. We're not making any requirement of anybody that they have to sign any kind of agreement with the lender or anything like that. We just want to make the landowner aware and acknowledge that that's the law.
And Andy, I think it's important that while we're not requiring any kind of agreement, that the landowners understand that depending upon the terms of the mortgage, placement of a conservation easement may have implications under their mortgage agreement. It depends upon the terms of the mortgage.
That's correct, and one of our requirements is that the mortgagee, that's the lender, is given notice that there's been an application for funding for conservation easement, so that that lender can say, hey, wait, hang on here, if you do that, I'm gonna foreclose on you, or whatever. They need to have notice of that. But we can't chase them down and try to get them to sign an agreement or whatever. It's already law.
And fundamentally, I agree with you, it's not really our business, it's between the landowner and their lender. But it is, it's kind of like we're not a party to the conservation easement, but we think it's important that the landowner in B understand that the conservation easement will be a controlling document.
Yeah.
Before we give away money.
And I'll just reiterate as well that principle, that one of the ways to conserve and preserve and protect land on a private basis is through conservation easements. The conservation easement conveys a property interest, and the conservation easement is between the landowner and the entity that is responsible for enforcing that conservation easement. And we're going to talk about some applications today that we've got in on this grant cycle that are purely that you have an applicant, Upstate Forever, and you have property owners who want to put a conservation easement permanently restricting their property, and you have to have an entity that looks at that, monitors it, and enforces that, and that's Upstate Forever in that case. And so that's just a little overview. Again, I'm an attorney, so I don't mind being redundant. It's part of what we do, so I don't mind repeating that. But what we have before us now is, or can I get a motion to approve our grant agreement with this one change on it?
So moved.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay,
We'll have a question.
okay, discussion, yes, sir.
The numbering of this page, will this page replace the last page in this document?
So you're,
Yes. The one that was in your backup
Right.
materials?
So that's
Yes.
9 of 9, this says 10 of 10?
it'll be 10 of 10, and I think that's because what I actually did today, this morning, is that if you look on page 6, I knocked the first signature block of the grant agreement, I knocked it down to its own page and then made every signature block for every entity its own separate page.
I see.
So that added a page in doing that. So it wasn't a change because of this substantive change we made, it's just a formatting change.
Okay.
Okay. And, that works well because, it makes it easier to get signatures from different people in different places and then put it together. So yes, the numbering will be 1 through 10. Any other questions on the grant agreement?
No, but.
Let me give you this,
Okay. I did get a hold of
Chris.
Mr. Starker, and he should be calling in shortly.
Okay.
Okay, what are we on?
So,
Oh,
we are on the grant agreement in the discussion, so there's treasurer's report. I'm giving you this. One of the things that we brought to the table today is that we didn't approve it last time because we wanted more language.
Okay.
So I added C and changed the page numbering.
And
And Andy,
this is, tell me one more time, I'm sorry, this is the grant agreement?
That is correct. First one on the discussion items.
and I suggest that, because since the grant agreement's never been approved, and the motion is to approve it, I suggest that assuming we approve it here in a minute when we vote, that you just send Katie
I will.
the electronic format, and she doesn't have to worry about what the changes are. She just takes this, and it's our first grant agreement, and then I'll have a motion after we vote on this motion.
Okay. So we've already made a motion and a second on approving this, Katie.
Okay,
We're in the
hang on.
discussion phase now. Any other,
Who made the motion? I'm so sorry. You made the motion?
I seconded it.
Not Laura. Anyway, okay. You said, okay. All right, sorry, go ahead.
and I think there's one other formatting thing. I took the record and return, and I made it record and return to, and I unbolded that. So that's another formatting change. Those are the only formatting changes I made, those two on the pages and that one up there, and then our substantive change. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye, and raise your hands. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed, passes unanimously.
I would like to make a motion that Katie have the IT department add the grant agreement to the webpage.
I second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye,
Aye.
raise your hands. Very good. Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is discussion or action regarding amending policy 002 and policy 003. We'll discuss policy 2 first. The intro to that is, we wanted to, Emily provided, or the Procedures Committee provided a draft of policy 2. We made changes to it
And here are
specifically.
the changes for discussion purposes. And I have a copy, I'll just put it right here, but it's for you, Katie.
Okay, so what you had in your packet on there is what it looked like before what I just handed to you, have you got the checklist as well?
Yes.
What I just handed to you, plus this checklist, is what we're proposing today.
I counted, so I have to make sure I give you the right number. Otherwise, but I didn't. There we go. We don't end up with a mess.
So this is a policy that deals with our bank account. And it has definitions first. And then the policy, it'll be on the back of that draft 3 document you've got.
And so you'll know that the items that are shaded are the changes from the current policy.
Right.
So that, I'm sure you'll all want to look at the entire policy, but the ones the changes are only the words that are shaded.
So just briefly going through it there, definitions on the front, and then the policy is that we'll open an account at Community First, which we have, what the name of the account will be, board shall manage that account. Disbursements from that account shall require 2 signatures, chair and secretary. That the board can invest our funds in the state pool, which we have done, and that the treasurer, that's the Oconee County treasurer.
It's defined. It doesn't need to be changed.
Very good, all
I
right.
did the same thing.
And then 7 is, and this is what we were really trying to get accomplished, is our procedure for what because we've done this several times, and we've never really coordinated it so that it worked as smoothly and effectively as we wanted to. Prior to dispersing any grant funds, the chair and the secretary shall independently complete the attached checklist. 8, the treasurer shall disperse funds from the state pool only upon authorization from the chair and secretary. And our process is that we tell Katie, and that Katie communicates to the treasurer to disperse funds, to pull them from the state pool. And then 9, the chair and secretary, so we can move funds, but the disbursement, the actual delivery of the funds, has to be done by the chair and the secretary. And that's after our checklist. So, for example, if we move funds from the state pool to Community First account, then the chair and the secretary go to the bank and sign a disbursement form saying pay $12,500 to the McLaurin Law Firm, and then it'll go to their escrow account for the closing. And before we do that, we go through the checklist to make sure everything's been done. We each, the chair and the secretary, dates when council approved our award of the grant, or our recommendation, the amount of the grant, once a grant has been approved by the council, we then notify the applicant that the council has approved the grant. They then have 4 months to accept that grant. And so that's applicant accepted award of grant. Emily, I actually think it should have, notification of award to applicant.
Yeah, because we have to,
That's one of the steps we've been missing.
notification of award to applicant. Okay.
All right.
So I will make that change if it's approved.
Okay. And then the applicant has to accept the award of grant, and we get written notice of that. Then within 14 days after they accept the grant award, they execute a grant agreement with the county and with us. They have to submit an appraisal if it hasn't been submitted already. We confirmed that the appraisal amount squares with what the applicant asked for.
And by way of history for Nick and Scotty, we occasionally will, if we don't have the appraisal when we're making our grant award, then our motion will be, for example, it will be, we're awarding $10,000 or 10% of whatever the appraisal is, whichever is less. So that if the appraisal comes in and they ask for 10%, $10,000 of $100,000, and the appraisal comes in and it's only $85,000, then we're only going to award $8,500. And so that's the reason this line is in there, because logistically it is sometimes difficult for applicants to have the appraisal as an actual part of the application. So we ended up giving the applicants some wiggle room and letting them give us a guesstimate of what it is, but we're holding them to the percentage of what they're asking for. Even if they're wrong, they can't get more money just by saying, oh, we think it's $150,000 property, but it's only $100,000. And so they got a higher percentage, because our policy is that we don't give more than 10%, except in extraordinary circumstances. I always have a loophole. But that's the reason that's in there. It's kind of weird to do it that way, but that's the reason that step is in there.
And so the checklist is really what we go through to deliver dollars to the applicant. And so we make our decision to approve or deny. It's essentially everything that happens after that. So the appraisal submitted, we confirm whether it comports with the grant application. They have, from that date that they give notice that they accept the award, they have 12 months within which to close unless they apply for an extension. So, and then the next is the closing date is set. They have to provide certain closing documents to us for our and the county attorney's review. Once we approve those, and that may be a knock it back and forth process, we'll date that. If it's going to be a direct deposit to the attorney, they have to have gotten a vendor number from the state. And then, if all those are met, we provide written authorization for county treasurer or Community First Bank to disperse the funds. And I think, Emily, for applicant accepted award or grant, I think we should say applicant provides written acceptance.
Well, that's in the policy.
Okay,
I was just trying to keep the words short
I got
so
you.
that it would stay in the little block.
I think it still should be in there so
Okay.
that we just know that they can't call you up and tell you.
Okay. Provides written, okay.
And so I will move that we approve our policy number 2 with the checklist, with corrections. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any more discussion on this? Any questions about it? Does it seem clear enough, Mr. Walker, Mr. Gambrell?
It does.
Okay, not terribly confusing?
No, that sounds good.
Okay, very good. Yes, ma'am.
Did you say you had some changes to this?
Yeah, and so we'll send you it with the changes.
You'll need to have that in your motion as far as what, or in the discussion.
Okay.
You can't vote yet because you've got to, because even though you discussed it beforehand, you
Okay.
didn't have that motion in that second. So
Okay.
now, if you will, it'll just be easier just
Okay.
to have what you want to change. But I do have, a question, or on slide 2, April is misspelled, so that needs to be changed.
Okay.
On
Okay.
slide 2. And do you have a copy of the checklist? Because I do not have one. I need to provide
I
that.
think
Okay.
Andy ended up with 2 copies, and that's the reason I didn't have one for you. I gave him 2.
And so I think we already approved policy number 2, I believe, right, Emily? So this is a revision.
Yes, this is revised April 6, 2021.
Okay.
And so, and Katie, I will make these changes and send you the electronic format on the checklist.
You're gonna do it?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. I did it this morning. It won't take me. The draft will obviously not be on there. We're not approving the draft part of it. And I will make the typographical change, which is just a typo, and then make the changes to the checklist.
So do you want me to start over with my motion and articulate the changes?
Because we're in discussion right now.
Okay,
Okay, so the only thing, what I would do is just say, these are the things, just like we did last time. Like, y'all made a motion, y'all made a second, and then during the discussion, it was, okay, we're gonna change A, B, and C. Remember, we took off like on the footer.
Right,
We took
okay.
off like all that, and just so that it's clear.
okay.
And then, once you've made all your discussion as far as what you want removed or changed or whatever, then at that point, then you can say, okay, as discussed or whatever, then we can make the, final vote. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I don't need to make another motion. You just want me to articulate clearly what the changes are. Is that correct?
Let me go back to the last minutes, because I'll tell you what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So, you made a motion in a second to approve, the OCCB section 2-040, the findings. And then change to the form included template, and then regarding the previous motion, it was, y'all approved that with the addition noted above. That's how I'll do the minutes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So you just need to read for her what our changes are.
Okay, that's what I'll do.
Yeah,
You ready? Okay.
yeah.
So, first change, we'll remove draft 3 from the document. Second change, we are adding a new definition, which is disperse. That's number 4.
Oh, I didn't catch that one.
Third change, we are spelling April correctly on page 2. Next change is we are adding a new line to the checklist that will go in between amount of grant approved and applicant accepted. So a new line in between those that says notification of award to applicant. The next change is in the line applicant accepted award of grant. We will change that to applicant provides written acceptance of award. And I believe that's it. All in favor? Aye. Hand raised. Aye. Charles, you with us?
7, 8, and 9 aren't changes?
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
Well-
Very good.
They're not
So, Dale, let me
changes
do
to the
that.
document we're looking at.
Yeah, it would just be because this is what's presented.
Okay, gotcha. Just changes to the
And
document we're
yeah,
looking at.
just because those were on there,
All right.
and she's going to, you said you're gonna change this,
Yeah,
right?
I will,
I would just say, just with the discussion, we're adding number 7, 8, and 9 under the policy.
well,
So
we
that
actually
it-
deleted some stuff too. So the motion is to accept the April 6th revision as proposed with the
Correct.
changes that you,
Just articulate.
yeah.
Okay, everybody voted?
All in favor, raise hands. Aye.
Perfect.
Any opposed? All good. Thank you. Next on the agenda is potential action regarding policy 3, grant procedures. Emily, did we want to make any changes to that?
Yes. Okay. So I have got, let me find, here is policy 3. Here's one for you. Here's a draft of a revised policy, and that's one for each of y'all, and here's one for Katie. The reason, first, can we have a motion so that we don't have to go backwards with the changes to
I
this
move that
proposed
we
document?
approve the draft of policy 0003 as presented. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay.
Okay. You'll see that, obviously it is listed as the first revision, the April 6th, and hopefully I spelled it right in the header this time. The big reason, and it's a very simple change, but if you'll flip over to, where is it? Page 4. I split the language of paragraph 4 under part 2 so that it would make more sense, and added a sentence that said the recipient's closing attorney must be registered as a vendor with the state of South Carolina prior to closing. The reason for this, and this is part of the reason why we made the changes to the bank account policy, is because we are currently transferring money from the state pool to Community First, and Community First charges us money. And then Community First wires it to the closing attorney, and they charge us money. And so we're spending, I can't remember, I looked it up, I think it's $35. Not a lot, but we're pretty tight for money. The state pool wires money without charging us. And they do have the power to wire money directly to the closing attorney's escrow account if the closing attorney has been registered as a vendor for the state. So I added that into this policy because we want the closing attorneys to register as a vendor so that we can save that $35. That's the only revision to the policy.
Just requiring them to be registered as a vendor.
Yeah. So, Charlie, you look like you have a question.
You're very perceptive. There was a comment earlier of the prospects of giving a check to an applicant, which would be a certified check.
That's correct.
I mean, is it conceivable that this could be done without a closing attorney, the need to wire money to a closing attorney's account? And if that's the case, if it would be the case, you would need to add the words, if money's to be wired to the closing attorney's account, that they need to be a vendor. They don't need to be a vendor with the state in
Yes.
order to
That's
represent
correct.
the applicant.
That's right.
Correct?
That is correct.
Is to be, and actually, if it's to be wired from
The state.
the, how did we define it in here? I think we defined it as state pool. No, it's not a defined term. So it would be, it's wired from the local government investment pool is its official name.
To the closing attorney.
You actually do in your policy too, you name it the state pool.
Yeah, but we don't in policy 3.
Okay.
So, and this is the only place we're going to use it here. So if the money is to be wired from the local government investment pool, because they're never going to issue a certified check.
That's correct, but say directly to the closing attorney.
Okay.
It's not if it goes to the bank, Community First, it's just if it
Oh,
goes
right.
to the closing attorney.
Oh, okay, so it would be recipients closing, so the addition is if money is to be wired from the local government investment pool to the closing attorney. Andy, do we need to say attorney's escrow account?
It'd be better.
Okay, so it'll be to the closing attorney's escrow account.
And just another thing I need to report on that, I did talk to Community First about waiving, one of the reasons we're doing this, because they charge us for certified checks.
Yeah,
That they wouldn't commit to not charging us, but they would commit to looking at it on a request by request basis. And giving me the indication that they would waive it sometimes, and maybe that'll be our first step, to see if they will, if we can just do it that way.
yeah,
Okay, so you want to go through your changes then?
Okay, so, so the only other change was adding the revision date, and this flips it over into 7 pages, so it's now a 7-page document, even after we remove draft. And that's the only change.
Well, you want to, I mean, you want to articulate them specifically, just like we did before?
Oh, okay. Well, the only change to the proposed document that is the motion is the addition of the words, "If money is to be wired from the local government investment pool to the closing attorney's escrow account," at the end of the last sentence in paragraph 4.
Very good.
And again, Katie, I can make these changes and send you the final document. It won't take me 2 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
Any more discussion? Y'all don't want to jump just deep into this? I understand. All in favor, aye, raise hands.
Aye.
Any opposed? Similar sign. Okay, the last one, next last, pending grants discussion. I'll report, there's only one pending grant out there where funds haven't been dispersed, and that's for the Peggy Moore project, 58.6 acres, with the Coney Soil and Water Conservation District being the applicant. We've approved everything. They've given us notice that they accepted the award. I'm not sure exactly when that happened, but the report is from Eddie Martin with the Soil and Water Conservation District. They've sent all the materials that they needed to send to the Natural Resources Conservation Service. If they don't get a knockback from them, and they accept the documents that they have sent, he predicts that they will close in early June of 2021. So that's the only pending grant status we have.
The amount of that grant?
What's that? It was a $10,000 grant.
And that letter was sent on March the 2nd.
March the 2nd is when they accepted the award, so they have till March 1st of next year to close without an extension. Yes, ma'am?
Okay. I hate to do a backsies. Do we need a motion, Katie, to ask the IT department to post the revised policy
Well, let's do it,
00?
Emma. Go ahead, just like we did
Okay.
before.
I'll make a motion to have the IT department post the revised policy 003.
Second.
Discussion?
You want the bank policy and grant procedures on there?
We didn't make that, okay.
You
I'll
want
do
to
it for
change on
both.
Policy 0002?
She already made a motion
Made a motion.
that we approved to put 2 in the checklist on there. This is
I thought the
3.
grant agreement.
Huh?
The grant agreement, yes, but not the.
Oh.
You didn't?
Okay.
You didn't.
Thank you, Katie. What would we do without you? So my motion is to place revised policy 0002 and the checklist, as well as revised policy 0003 on the website.
Point of order, may I
Need a second?
second.
Okay.
Any discussion?
Now you can have discussion.
All in favor? Aye. Raise hands. Any opposed? Similar sign. Point of order that I wanted to ask you, Katie. I've got an update of our chart of grants that we've given out that I'd like to distribute to everybody.
Yeah.
Is there any procedure or anything you need to do for that, for me to do that?
I'm gonna let you make that decision.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So in that pending grant report, just as an append to that, I'm handing out a chart of all the grants we've given, amounts, acreages, what it was for, with the cumulative totals there. I think it's important that we're all aware of, I mean, this is what we do, and everybody's aware of what we have done. And so that's just a supplemental piece of this discussion item talking about pending grants. It doesn't need to be approved, it's just
Information.
information. Okay? Next on our list is discussion action regarding applications submitted by the April 1st deadline. Let me ask Nick, do you know, when do you need to leave today?
I have to leave at 10 o'clock, so
Okay.
I got 10 minutes.
Okay, very good. Upstate Forever submitted 2 grant proposals to us. Katie has sent those grant proposals to all of the members. Don't know if you've had time to review those or not. It's not crucial that you've reviewed those before this meeting. Our votes on these grant proposals will be done at our next meeting, which I believe is May 19th, where we'll use our criteria worksheets and evaluation sheets. No, it's May 18th is when our next meeting, our voting meeting on this is. The thing that's helpful today is if you have looked at the grant proposal, we might have questions to ask of the applicant, Upstate Forever, or of the landowners, and I want to point out that Dorothy Hager?
Hager, yes.
Hager is here with the Tyco Ida proposal, and Ernie Lombard is here with the Whetstone Hill proposal. I did a intro review of it and have a few questions, and I think, let me ask first, does anybody else have any questions for the applicant or the landowner? And this is just what we're trying to do at this particular point is get more information if we need it to consider as we do our reviews independently at home in preparation for our May 18th meeting when we'll vote. Maybe you'll have questions today, maybe you won't. I would ask that the members of the board do review the application within the next 2 weeks, and if questions do come up, that you send those questions to me. I'll then organize those questions and make them directly to the applicant or landowner, to give them enough time to respond before the decision date. Does anybody have any questions to begin with? Emily, do you have any questions?
Yes.
Emily, you have a question?
I have questions on both applicants, or just additional information. So do you want to just do one application first? Or
Yeah,
do you
let's
want
start
to
with
jump in?
Tyco Ida.
Okay, and this is for the applicant. I noticed a copy of the mortgage was attached, but the letter to the lender was not attached. Our application requires that we have documentation that the lender was notified of the application for funding for conservation easement. So I think that has got to be checked off the list. So that's the first thing we need to tell the applicant, is that
Let me
needs to be
interrupt.
done.
I mean, did Chris make it? Is he here?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, he did.
Can he speak to us?
He
Chris?
can, he just has to unmute
Okay.
this side, because I think that's what I keep hearing, because I didn't know what it was.
Okay. Chris, if you do have any responses, feel free to jump in and give them.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you can. Can you hear the birds in the car too? I've been on. Hey,
I didn't know what it was.
I'll be happy to answer that question. But first, I
Yes.
just want to say, have you ever seen the landowners for these applications show up for these meetings? So I just want to give a shout out to my landowners out there, Dorothy and Ollie, both being in the audience today. I think that's pretty cool because this is the first time that's ever happened to me as well. So I love that these landowners are fired up about these conservation easements, that they're showing up for these conservation bank meetings. I think that's awesome.
We think that's wonderful. Go ahead.
Sorry. As far as a letter to the lender, now Dorothy, she has notified her attorney is working on that subordination. I don't have a letter to the lender. I did not see that as a requirement in the application. I'm trying to look for that now. Is in the actual application itself?
It's in the question where it says, is there a mortgage? And then what it says, it's probably in little bitty print. It says, if there is, provide documentation that the lender has been notified of the application. So that should be around section 2, question 2D, if you've got it in front of you.
Yes, here. Okay, it would help to look at the right application. Right, my apologies.
Okay.
There we go. Section 2B. Yes. There's a more, it says to, okay, all right. I saw where it has a list of the encumbrances, and then I moved on.
Understood.
Documentation showing that applicant or lender has notified each lender in writing that if mortgage, okay. So now Dorothy, she's in the audience. She can verify that her attorney has been already ordered to subordinate the mortgage to the conservation easement. So I don't know if we have documentation for that, but we can probably get that to you. Because her attorney is already working on that. Now, she may be able to add to that. That's as good as I know. I just know that in my conversations with Dorothy, that is already in process. At the end of this, there's a checklist for this application. I do have that it's written on order, but I did not put that in my comments in this question right here. I do apologize. And we do not have an actual letter to the lender. I apologize for that. We can produce one for you.
Well, it just says that must submit documentation showing that the lender has been notified.
So
Okay.
I think if, Dorothy, if your attorney is willing to submit a letter saying that he has, on the record, that he has notified the lender, that wouldn't that be sufficient documentation?
Yeah, or to send us a copy of
Or send us a
whatever
copy.
request they made.
Yeah,
email
depending
that.
upon whether or not it has information that we don't need. If the letter contains a lot of information that you would prefer not to have public, then,
Well, yeah, and you can just write a summary.
Dorothy, if I could get you to come to the podium and introduce yourself, I would greatly appreciate that.
I am Dorothy Hager, landowner of the Taquita
Okay.
application. And if we can get the attorney even just to write a summary letter of what has happened or what he is proposing, that should be.
That'll be fine.
Because
Sure.
we don't need the actual approval of a subordination agreement.
That's
no,
correct.
We just need to let them know that we're in the process of,
That's correct.
yes,
Yeah, the lender's been notified. That's
Yeah.
right.
thank you.
And so if you can stay right there,
uh,
while you're there, while I've got her, I'll go ahead and ask a question related
go right
to
ahead.
it. Okay. So you're not looking for any additional funding other than coming to the Coney County Conservation Bank, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so the rest of the property interest compensation is going to be a donation from you, correct, to UF or however it needs to work?
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. Do you have anybody have any more questions for Dorothy?
No.
I think my
Oh,
question.
well, it's sort of for Dorothy and Chris. This relates to section 3, question 5, which is the land management plan. And I need to throw this out to the board also. As I understood the ordinance, we have to evaluate the entity that's going to enforce the restrictions, which in this case would be the applicant, Upstate Forever. And we have to look at the qualifications of the person who's going to actually manage the land, which in my thought would be, in this case, would be you, Dorothy. And, theoretically, if it was a huge piece of property, the landowner might have a property manager. We've never seen that. And so it's possible that the ordinance was written thinking, to address that. But nonetheless, that's something we have to look at and we have to report to the county council. So my statement for Chris is, you kind of listed yourself as the land manager and gave you, or Upstate Forever, not you personally. And I believe that needs to be revised to indicate that Dorothy and the other applicant, weren't there two of you?
Two landowners.
no,
It's your piece of
Oh,
property.
my husband.
Oh, okay, you and your husband, sorry, will be managing the land, and what your qualifications are, which, in this instance, you don't have to have. It can be, I don't know how you want to word it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we're not going to expect the same kind of qualifications from a private property owner that we would expect from a land management company. So, but just something about, one that, I don't know.
No, I think that's sufficient.
Yeah.
You've got an idea. And UF will be responsible for monitoring and enforcing, but, you still own the property, y'all will be managing it.
Yeah, you'll be living on it and caretaking it and
Right.
all of that stuff.
So you want something in writing about how we're gonna uphold the end of the agreement
Yes,
on our end
yes.
to enforce the conservation.
To manage
What
the
a great way
land.
to put it. What a great way to put it. Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
I have two more questions, and,
Can I have a follow-up?
oh, yes,
on that
go
question?
right ahead, Charles. Okay,
Yeah.
Nick, that's fine, thank you.
Thanks,
I don't know
Nick.
that you do or not, but if you engage the services of, say, a professional consulting forester or something along those lines, either now or in the past, or you anticipated in the future, a reference to that individual or entity would be meaningful to me, and to see that.
Okay, because we did have the forestry service come out just to check about, make sure our property was safe from burning, that type of thing.
Oh, yes,
That would be great
We
to
did have-
cite something like that,
To
but.
make sure we didn't need controlled burning or something like that.
yes.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Okay, I'll go forward with mine. So we appreciate you put in there a 200-foot buffer.
Yes.
And I just wanted to make sure that you consider, and that would be on streams, but that you also consider that in terms of the wetlands as well.
Yes, that would be as part of the, I believe we mentioned that there would be no buildings except on a specific area that the house is already currently standing.
Right.
And then so many feet behind. So the wetlands currently have nothing around it and currently do not have any outbuildings or anything.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just look at it from the point of view of, I'm not sure what you do on the property, that could be, compromised water bodies like streams or wetlands, whether it's, pasture, fertilizing pasture, or
Right.
harvesting timber, that sort of thing. That when you think about buffers, not only for the stream,
Correct.
you think about them for the wetland as well.
Correct, so, like in our case.
But it doesn't have to be anything constructed, it's just we don't do certain things within a certain distance of the streams and wetlands.
So like we don't fertilize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Yeah, that's where I'm going at, is just trying to expand that buffer to include the wetlands.
And that does raise a question for me, Andy, that I just thought of. I understand, and I have not read the conservation easement in its entirety, but from the first couple of pages, it looks like there's a reserved right for farming. Y'all may not plan to farm it, but it's a reserved right, so in 75 years, the owner could have a farm. And so in anticipation of if the right to farm is ever exercised, that reserved right, I would like to see something that specifies that best practice, and it may be in there, and Chris probably knows, that best practices would be used and steps would be taken to preclude any livestock from getting into any of the waterways, the wetlands or and it may, if it's, I would just hate to see, after all the effort you've done in 75 years, and if we're going to give money, I don't want to see that all of a sudden we've got horses or cows that are wandering down to the water because it's now pasture land, which it could potentially be if there's a reserved right for it to be a farm.
Chris, do you know, I don't recall that being a reserved right for farming land.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
sir.
Okay, I feel like I'm always on mute. From what I understand, you cannot exclude agriculture from a conservation easement. So it's always a reserved right in a conservation easement. That's an IRS requirement. Therefore, it is a reserved right. Hunting, fishing, and agriculture are always included in every conservation easement. So that's just first and foremost. I question whether you can dictate in the conservation easement how agricultural practices are done, with the exception of clearing land or within certain buffers. So the easement may not, I don't know that in the easement language we can specifically say they have to fence cattle out, but we can say that no agricultural practices within 200 feet of the buffer. So that is something that can be included, whether it's in that CE or not. I'm trying to scroll through it and I don't see it. I'm just having a hard time with this 150-page application.
That's fine, Chris,
Well, we can double check it,
and that certainly would be satisfactory to me. I'm not trying to say how it's addressed. I'm concerned that it be addressed, that if it's going to be farmland and if there's going to be livestock, that there be something in it that addresses that those buffers don't get compromised.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So that's the purpose of the buffer. And that buffer purpose will continue, regardless of what's happening with the property.
Right. It actually says in here that grantors shall not undertake any agricultural uses. So I have to go back and check that, because I don't think we can take that out. I mean, I don't think we can. What am I trying to say?
You don't
I don't think we
that?
can disallow. I think it has to be allowed.
Okay.
But it currently says no agricultural uses at all. So that.
And it's been well over a decade since I have looked at conservation easements, and I never did in South Carolina. So I don't know what the status of the current law is.
Okay, so we'll
Right.
readdress that and
Yeah.
look into it a little further.
Okay.
And last question I had, Chris and Dorothy, is, in the appraisal, I assume that appraisal is considering the retained right to build one additional residential structure. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Alan McCravey was provided with this very exact same draft
Okay.
conservation easement when he conducted the appraisal.
Okay, very good. That was my last question. Any more questions for Dorothy? Chris, you stay on for the next one.
And Chris, just because because it may came up again, the retained right to add structures, it might be helpful for us if you either put in the application just one sentence that the appraiser was aware of the retained rights or something, so we don't end up asking you this every time it comes up. If you think about it,
Okay.
because it may be 2 years other than these two applications before it comes up again.
Okay,
Our appraiser did receive a copy of the draft
Uh-huh,
prior to the appraisal, so he was aware of that was in the draft.
okay.
Good,
Yeah.
and we appreciate that, that's good.
Yes,
And
that's
now we
excellent.
understand, and that's what we needed to do.
Yeah. Okay,
I think that's all for you, Ms. Hager. And Chris, I really do want to just say before I go on that I really appreciate the narrative, how you introduce the proposals with that narrative. I think it's very effective.
I appreciate that, thank you. I worked really hard on that.
it
I
was.
can tell. You're a hardworking man.
I want to say that, on that, the questions earlier about land management, that with this, in this case, yes, Dorothy and Gary are the land managers, and I did list them as land managers, and I see where the confusion is later on. I described the land management from the Upstate Forever perspective, and so my error on that, they are listed as the land managers.
Okay.
Yeah, on page 1, I think.
Right, earlier in the application, they're listed as, as the land managers. We typically, at least for South Carolina Conservation Bank application, if there's no actual land management plan, like for example, forestry, or if there's not some conservation plan through NRCS or USDA, typically if there's not some formal land management plan, the conservation easement is treated as that land management plan.
Okay.
To my knowledge, there are no other existing plans or land management plans on the property. We are happy to address that through a letter, just as Dorothy said. We can come up with something. I just wanted to point that out, though, that in our experience, that I've never seen that land management addressed in any other way. This conservation easement is the only thing that will address how the land is managed once this is signed. So,
Okay, Chris,
yeah.
let me draw your attention to section 3, question 5. Under B, you submitted the conservation easement, and that was fine in terms of a land management plan. But A asks for the financial resources and qualifications of the managing entity, and that's
Yes.
where you put the UF information, and that's where we need.
Right. That's what I said. Yeah. So I
okay.
caught that because the question was, it was talking about the applicant, and then I just kept going talking about myself, because that's what I do. I like to talk about myself.
Okay.
We
I get very
typically
excited
enjoy
about
that.
these things. So yes, and as Dorothy said, we'll address that and give you some background on that as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move to the Whetstone Hill application. And Mr. Lombard, would you come to the podium and introduce yourself?
Good morning. Legally, my name is Ole Ernest Lombard. Commonly, I'm known as Ernie. So that's how, and as I tell folks, please call me anything except late for dinner.
Good to have you here.
Thank you all.
Questions for Mr. Lombard or for Chris on the Whetstone Hill proposal?
Well, I'll just real quick let you know that we're going to have the same question about land management here.
Right, and if y'all can just address it.
And I don't, in my cursory look, I didn't see any mention of stream or wetland buffers. Did I just miss those?
I didn't see it either.
Is it not mentioned in the application? It's in the easement.
Okay,
Okay, all right.
yeah,
It's a requirement in the easement. I'll tell you, for this project, it's probably 100 foot.
Okay.
okay.
100 feet is kind of standard, or minimum. Let me say that. And for an agricultural land, we would probably do 100 feet instead of 200 or more. We have done 300 or even 400 in certain cases. I'm looking at the CE now. Who writes these things? They're so long.
And which is the
Oh, it
reason
says
I know.
200 here as well.
What?
200 foot for this application as well.
Okay, very good.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I've got two PDFs open, and that's my problem.
But while you're looking it up, Ernie, do you plan in, I think that has been leased as pasture for cows?
Currently, it is leased to the
Okay.
neighbor.
And my concern here, and I'm sure you're not surprised to hear it after our last discussion, is that the cows get into the stream. And I'll tell you, I know that because I live 2 doors down from that property.
Right.
And I think we actually met at an Oconee Forever one time. I didn't recognize you. I apologize.
It's nice to see you again.
But, so that's one of, is the intent to keep that land in agriculture? And and can you provide us, you don't have to do it right now, but before we consider it, can we have information about how we can, what efforts are going to be made to keep those cows out of that stream?
Okay. And Chris, if you will, please listen in, of course, and comment if something comes up that crosses your mind that may be helpful. And Ms. Hitchcock, it's nice to see you again, and thank you for your question. And to answer your question, in reality, my vision is for the cattle not to be crossing the stream. And I know that this is a public hearing in the event that others can listen in, if you will. However, I have not gotten that far with the current lessee, if you will. However, that is in my mind, okay?
Okay.
Now, what I have done in order to rely on expertise regarding that, I have made an application with the Oconee County Soil and Water Conservation folks to see about possibly some assistance, not only with guidance, but there may possibly be a minimal amount of funding available, which in my opinion would also throw another safeguard into that aspect as well. That's a pending application. The deadline, of course, was met, so no awards have been made at this point, but I do perfectly understand what you are saying, and that is a goal of mine, to avoid cattle from all that I can do to be out of that stream, okay? In reality, because I understand exactly what you're saying, and I've seen the effects of it through time myself, okay?
So is that application with the Soil and Water Conservation District for funding to build a fence? Is that-
Well, what it is, okay, and I can briefly explain what I understand, okay, it is guidance and participation, if you will. It's through the federal level, if you will. So possibly, if I recall correctly, I think it's $500 a year possibly that they throw in, but it offers to not only funding, but guidance as well. Okay, this is how we can recommend to assist with management of that property, and a fence would be a reality. Honestly, myself, I do not consider myself to be a cattleman, okay? I'll just tell you, in reality, if I may, I can give you a brief history of the property and how that I am the current owner, if you all's time allows and if you're interested, but that's your choice.
What's our pleasure?
Fine, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna be 62 later this month, so my entire lifetime, my mother and father owned the property. My mother actually grew up at Whetstone, so that's been in family name, if you will, for my entire lifetime. Whenever both of my folks are no longer living, so to make a long story short, the property became owned by my brother, my sister, and myself, and through family negotiations with other pieces of property as well. The property is now mine, so my ultimate goal is the preservation of that property specifically, that hilltop, I mean, I remember as a child going there with my grandfather and flying kites on that hill, and it's just a special place to me. And in reality, the cattle are not, I mean, that's not a priority for me. It's minimal income as far as I'm concerned. To me, the greater need is the preservation of the creek and such. So I have only leased it. It's on a 1-year basis, which can be broken, if you will, by either party, with the correct amount of time and such. So that is the way that has taken place. And in all honesty, when the property was transferred to me in my name, and there is no mortgage on the property, whenever the property was transferred to me, the lease was currently in effect with the current owner, and just a variety of things rather than, stopping immediately and such. And it has been partially to try my best to be a good neighbor, if you will, and kind of go through due process, so that, if that makes sense what I'm saying, but that's my ultimate goal. I mean, in reality, it would not offend me at all if there were no cattle there and it returned to grassland, or a natural state, in my opinion, but that's just me.
Yeah.
If
Well,
that's-
I can understand.
And,
Do you lease it to Jimmy Robbins?
yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
And see, he's my neighbor too.
So,
I understand.
right, so you know the neighborhood, if you will, right? So if there's something in particular that would be helpful, I mean, as far as you all's consideration, and Chris, if you're there, I mean, I'm agreeable with whatever, and looking back at the buffer, I mean, if it's more favorable for a greater distance from the waterway, I have no problem with that. In all honesty, in the proposal with Upstate Forever, I mean, there's a clause, if you will, as far as the construction of one residence, and if I recall correctly, I think it's 2,000 feet or less. I mean, nothing major, and in reality, if that's done during my lifetime, it would be in that grove of trees where it's really not visible. I mean,
Yeah.
for my privacy as well. So,
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's just kind of my vision, if that's helpful.
It is.
It is very
Thanks so much,
helpful.
Ernie. I
Thanks.
appreciate that.
Certainly.
So would it help to have a copy of his application to the Soil and Water District as part of the land management plan?
I think it would, yeah,
Yeah.
that would be great.
Okay. And on that note, I know that Ernie had been talking to I can't remember her name, who was over at NRCS, and she retired last year.
Oh, right, Heather.
Heather Ramsey.
Yes.
Yeah, Heather Ramsey. She had come out and looked at the property, and then she retired, and there's a new person over there, Kelly Hernandez. And I've been talking with Kelly and Eddie Martin. What Upstate Forever has been wanting to do is establish a countywide sort of a grant program that would be modeled similar to EQIP, and I had certain properties in mind. For Upstate Forever, they would only apply to properties that were protected with conservation easements. So this would be one of those examples where a landowner like Ernie could come to us and say, I'd like to send cattle out of the stream, and we would be able to provide some grant funding to help make that happen. The bonus of that is going through the Farm Bill and any EQIP grant can take you a year or two just to get the funding, and we may be able to make that happen in an expedited fashion because the money would be a little more readily available. And so we could get projects moving more quickly in fencing these cattle out. And we are also talking with Dwayne Estes over the Southeastern Grassland Initiative. They have a new position they just filled in the Piedmont area, so they're working in Georgia and South Carolina. And he's been asking for potential projects, and this is exactly one of those projects. So I think between some cattle fencing here and sort of grassland restoration, this is where we're able to use some of these conservation easements and put on some actual conservation programs on the ground. Now, we don't have plans for these things. We didn't submit them in the application. There are no plans for grassland restoration, and that's not even my decision at all. I just want to make that's Ernie's decision. We just want to make those opportunities available. But he has expressed interest in those things, and so that's what gets us so excited to have partners like Ernie.
Oh, absolutely. That sounds just very exciting, Chris.
Absolutely. I think it's, having a buffer in there could help drive things towards those kind of initiatives. I think it's a good idea. Any other questions? Okay.
I have one last query.
Go ahead.
And this is for Chris. And it's just a matter of information because I am not a lifetime resident of the area. You said that the property is 2.7 miles from the Whetstone community. What did you use as the place where you measured that? Or maybe it is Ernie's question.
I had the same question, Chris. Where is downtown Whetstone?
So listen, if you look on a map, and you can look on the maps that I provided in this application, you'll see where anyway, you can see on the map where the Whetstone is, and I know it's just a crossroads. I know it is. So I thought it was odd that it comes up on a map too. But if you put in the address for this property into Google and say, I want driving directions to Whetstone, it will come up and it will tell you 2.7 miles. So, I didn't want to leave anything out. I figured might as well put it in. I know that it's not a municipality, but it is listed as a community. So it's there.
Very good.
Well, now I know how you found it.
We know it's a community because we live in it. We just don't know where it is.
It's I'm pretty sure it's just a crossroads, but I think when you zoom in on, as I checked, when you zoom in on a map, it's just I don't know which road. Probably Earl's Ford and.
Yeah, I'm betting that's the four-way stop.
You think it's it's not
it's not
2.7 miles to the four-way stop though.
Well, it's got its own mountain and its own creek, so it has to be a place.
Yeah, there you go.
You can Google directions to Whetstone, and that's where it takes you.
I'm going
No
to
lie.
do it and drive to it so that I can see it.
Report back. If we don't have any more questions for Mr. Lombard and Chris, I think we're good in terms of you're able to sit down. Though the last thing I want to do is that I want to move that the board authorizes two of our members to visit the Tacoida property and two of our members to visit the Whetstone Hill property. So that's a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on that? We do that routinely. We send members, and I guess just add that the chair can appoint those, or do we want to appoint those now? We'll just let me appoint those, if you're going to append that to that motion. And the last thing that I had with our applications is,
Oh, yes.
all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Raise hands. The last thing I had is that this is the first time that our applicants have used our new application. Chris, how did you like it? Never mind.
Really? I like it okay.
You think it was better?
I think it's better. I think it's still got a couple wrinkles in it. I'm happy to go back through it and let you know what I think. I think I submitted some comments before you finalized it.
Yep.
And I do think it would not hurt to include more definitions up front, because I did refer to that a couple of times, and I'm like, there's just really nothing here. I have to go through it to be more specific for you, but I think it's better. There's a lot of requests in there. I mean, you saw what I gave you. It's a 150-page grant application. But, a lot of it's fluff. It's a lot of maps and excerpts from appraisals, and here's a draft conservation easement and stuff, and it's there and it's useful. That's why I put that narrative up front. I put the narrative up front with the application right behind it so that you could see this is the project, and that's what you're going to get to before you fall asleep. So, yeah, I think it's better. I think it could be even better, but I would probably say that about any grant application.
Well, if you send, please send me any specific suggestions you have, and we'll consider integrating those.
Chris, you understand that these are approved by weight, is that not right?
Say that again?
These are approved by weight. The heavier they are, the better chance of approval.
Oh, well, I think I should send you a paper application then, because digital doesn't say anything.
Yeah, I go through and look at, and study some of the stuff on the computer, and then print out only the things that I feel like I need to take intensive notes or re-examine. I do have a question for you, Chris, and I don't know, I have not broached this with the board. Would it be easier if it was in a Word format so that you could put some of what in the some of the narrative responses in the application itself?
Well, I think that is one, the format of it is one issue I have, because it's a PDF, and even though you can put answers on there, you don't always, when you go to click on a space, it doesn't always give you a cursor there. It does typically for numbers, but if I want to put it in text, it won't always come up. And then sometimes it comes up as like an 8-point font that you can barely see. Sometimes it comes up as 24 font, and so there's no consistency to it. Whereas I believe there are Word formats where there are blanks or something that it has like a character limit or something, which can be constraining, but it at least gives you a space to make sure that all of your text is in one place. That's one of the reasons why I created the narrative and put it up front and outlined it on the application itself, so that I had, freedom to roam and wasn't limited by space. So, I mean, that's one complaint I have, but it's not. It's more of just a convenience thing, because the narrative does allow me to say what I need to say.
As it should.
Which is very important, but sometimes something that gets in the narrative doesn't get in the little box over there, because I was actually going through the criteria worksheet also. And one of the things I know Laura was particularly wanted to be able to do was just start at the application and go through our criteria worksheet. And I found I still had to do a little flipping, but I thought it was because of, or this was my conclusion, you had given us the information and you were limited in room on the, for example, on Ernie's property, it took me a few minutes. At one point, it was a 1/4 mile on Whetstone Creek and 1,400 feet on the tributary. In another place, it just said 3,400 feet on Whetstone and its tributary. And my brain had to go back and make those two match up.
Yeah.
And now that's just me, but that was kind of, I was looking where you had typed, and it was just, you didn't have much room. And that's what made me wonder if it would be a little helpful if you could,
Yeah.
I don't know, it is definitely a work in progress.
Yeah, and this is a small piece of property, so there's not a lot of water, but you could imagine if it was, 500 acres with 3 or 4 tributary streams on it, you could run out of room very quickly. You'd have to simply put an answer that says, please see the narrative, but that would not address Ms. Havern's concerns, where she wants to just look at the application and do the checklist. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's room for improvement, but That format is certainly one.
Okay, understood. Thanks, Chris. Anything else?
No.
Okay, very good. Do we have
We
a
will,
motion?
we will
to-
address these concerns. Do you want us to send you a new application, or do you want us
No.
to just send you additional information?
Additional information.
All right, we'll be happy to do that next week. That's all right.
Thanks, Chris. We appreciate that.
Motion to
My
adjourn.
pleasure, huh?